The evening light drifted through my bedroom window, laying a soft, almost sorrowful glow across the old photograph of my first communion that I was trying to straighten. Today, I turned 72, and it feels as though all those years have been building up to this exact moment, to finally have the courage to tell the truth. My name is Evelyn Harper, and this is my confession. I ask you, whoever you are, to sit with me for a while. Listen as the rain taps against the glass, steady and quiet. Folks say rain is a blessing, but for me, it only ever came after storms that tore through my life and left scars that never fully healed. What I'm about to share isn't just a story. It's a wound that never closed, a faith twisted into a weapon, a life stolen piece by piece. If you're listening, keep your heart open. This tale might bring you sorrow. It has haunted me for more than half a century. And if you hear me, no matter where in the world you are, leave a word behind, because some truths must be told, even when they rattle the very foundations of belief. I was raised in a small clay house with a dirt floor and a roof patched with straw. We didn't have much, but my mother, Helen, gave us all the love she had. She worked day and night washing clothes just to feed the four of us, me and my three brothers. My father, Charles, liked to call himself a God-fearing man. That's what he'd say when he slammed his fist on the table or reached for his belt. He who spares the rod hates his child, he'd bark while we shrank back in fear. Mama, always bowed and quiet, would whisper, "God sees everything," once he staggered off to Sonny's tavern. In our little town, the church was everything. And Father Andrew, our priest, was treated like a saint. Whatever he said was law. He had a way of looking at you, as though he could see every hidden sin buried deep in your soul. I was 19 when everything changed. That was the year I met Daniel, the pharmacist's son. He was handsome, always smiling, and had this gentle way about him when he played guitar at the summer festivals. Whenever his eyes met mine, I felt a warmth I'd never known before. Maybe it was a sin, but it was the sweetest sin a heart could feel. At one of those church picnics, Daniel asked me to dance. I was shy, but I said yes. We swayed close, his hand resting carefully on my waist, the scent of him filling the warm night air. That was all, just a dance. But it was enough for Tommy, Father Andrew's nephew, to catch sight of us. By the next morning, the whole town was whispering that I'd thrown myself at Daniel. When I walked through the door, my father was waiting, his face burning with rage. "You've disgraced this family," he thundered while Mama cried silently at the kitchen sink. He said there was only one way left to restore our honor. The next day, Father Andrew came to our house himself. Mama's hands trembled as she poured him coffee, while he sat at the table as though he already knew my fate. "Evelyn has a calling," he said with solemn weight. "God is calling her." A calling? What calling? I didn't want to be a nun. I wanted to be a teacher, to marry, to raise children of my own. I wanted to feel Daniel's warmth again, just once more. But Father Andrew already had the plan laid out. There was a convent, St. Mary's Abbey, out in rural Montana. The Sisters of Providence would purify me, he said, and guide me back to the path of God. My father agreed without hesitation. Mama wept into her apron, but said nothing. She wouldn't dare challenge what was called God's will. That night, I hugged Rosie, my childhood rag doll, as though she could protect me from what was coming. My father's voice still rang in my ears. "Pack your things. You leave next week." I sobbed until I could no longer breathe. It was Aunt Ruth, the town midwife, who offered me the only comfort. She had a way with herbs and with words. She told me, "Child, sometimes we're forced down rivers we never chose. But even those rivers lead to seas that belong to us. Hold on to that." The night before I left, I met Daniel one last time, in the shadows behind the church. He held my hands tight, his eyes shining. "I'll wait for you, Evelyn, no matter how long it takes." Such innocent words. We were young enough to believe that love alone could fight the whole world. The journey to Montana was long and harsh, 3 days rattling in a pickup truck down dirt roads, then 2 more on a train that screamed like a wounded animal. I'd never left Promise Creek before. Every field, every new town made me feel smaller, lonelier. All I carried was a bundle of plain clothes, a medal Mama gave me, and Grandma's wooden rosary. When St. Mary's Abbey came into view, I felt like my soul shrank to half its size. The place was massive, towering, more fortress than holy ground, with walls that seemed to promise only cold silence. Sister Margaret, the Mother Superior, greeted me at the door. She was tall, bony, her skin pale as parchment. She spoke without the faintest trace of a smile. "Welcome to the house of God. Here you will learn discipline, obedience, and the fear of the Lord." That very first day, they cut my hair long, black locks that Daniel once said were beautiful, shorn to the scalp, falling lifeless on the stone floor. They stripped my clothes, bathed me in icy water, and dressed me in a rough wool habit that scratched against my skin. From this day on, they said, "You are no longer Evelyn Harper. You are Sister Mary of Divine Obedience." That night, on a thin mattress in a dark, cold cell, I buried my face into the pillow and wept. I tried to remember Mama's bread, Daniel's smile, the smell of the river. I fought to hold on to who I was. Life at the convent was endless repetition, like beads on a rosary, one after another. Up at 4 to the clang of a bell. An hour of prayers on stone-cold knees. Cleaning, silence, more prayers, more silence. "A closed mouth catches no flies," Sister Margaret would hiss if anyone dared whisper. Meals were nothing but stale bread and watered milk. Work in the garden, sewing, catechism, always in silence, always with bowed heads. Nights brought more prayers than a restless sleep on empty stomachs. There were 27 other novices there. Girls with hollow eyes and trembling hands, some as young as 15. Their pasts were locked away, never spoken of. "The outside world is dead to you," warned Father Anselm, the confessor who came weekly, his sharp eyes darting like a predator's. It was during my 3rd week that I met Rachel. We were on laundry duty together, steam rising around us. She was different, alert, thoughtful, with eyes that burned with quiet defiance. One day, as I scrubbed the hall floor, she slipped me a folded scrap of paper. "Be careful what you say in confession." At first, I didn't understand. But soon I did. In my next confession, I told Father Anselm that I missed my family. The very next day, I was summoned to Mother Superior's office. She knew every word I'd spoken. "Longing for your family is the devil's work," she declared, and struck my palms with a ruler until they swelled and burned. "Thank us for this correction. It saves your soul." Through tears, I whispered, "Thank you, Mother." That was when I realized this wasn't a house of God. It was a prison disguised as holiness. Rachel found me later. "This place is not of God," she whispered. "I've seen terrible things." And then, one stormy night, I did too. I heard footsteps in the hall and cracked my door open just enough to see Father Anselm slip into Teresa's cell, with Sister Agnes guarding the hallway, candle in hand. The next morning, Teresa was gone. When I asked about her, the older nuns lowered their eyes. "Some trials are harder than others. Pray for her." Rachel confirmed what I feared. It wasn't the first time. The priests and nuns worked together in silence, protecting each other, while the victims were locked away or punished. Rage filled me. Rage at my father for sending me here, rage at the priest who condemned me, rage at a church that imprisoned young girls in the name of God. One night in the pantry, I whispered to Rachel, "How can we escape this place?" She met my eyes with determination. "I don't know yet, but we will. Trust me." From that moment on, survival became my only prayer. I bowed my head, played the obedient novice, and confessed sins I invented. But deep inside, Evelyn Harper, the girl from Promise Creek, still lived. She still dreamed of Daniel, still longed for the river, still burned with the will to be free. Apprehension clung to me like a weight as I recited the evening prayers. My lips moved through the Hail Marys, but my mind wasn't on God, it was caught in the whirlwind of what we were about to do. What if they catch us? I whispered to Rachel as we slipped back to our quarters. Her eyes, steady and burning with determination, met mine. "If we stay quiet, Evelyn, nothing changes. We'll never get out of here. And those poor girls downstairs will keep suffering." That night, the convent fell into a silence so heavy it almost seemed alive. Only the wind rattling against the windows and the faint sound of someone crying in the distance broke the stillness. At midnight, barefoot so we wouldn't be heard. Rachel and I met in the hallway. She carried a small candle, its fragile flame our only ally against the darkness. We walked slowly, whispering prayers, not to the priests or nuns, but to a God we still hoped might listen. The chapel stood empty when we reached it. Moonlight spilled through the stained glass windows, painting the stone floor with trembling colors. A shiver ran down my spine, part fear, part cold. "Let's go," Rachel urged, gripping my hand. The little door behind the confessional was waiting for us. This time the lock was already open. The spiral staircase that appeared felt like something out of a nightmare. A wave of mold and rot hit us as we descended. The candlelight danced against the damp stone walls, casting long, eerie shadows. What we found below turned my stomach. The basement was huge, lined with a row of heavy wooden doors. It didn't look like part of a convent. It looked like a prison. "Teresa? Lucy?" Rachel called softly. A faint groan answered. We hurried to one of the doors and peered through the barred opening. Teresa was curled up on a filthy mattress, her face gaunt, her eyes sunken and ringed with black circles. "We've come to help," I whispered, while Rachel fumbled with her hairpin at the lock. Teresa shook her head. Her voice was barely a breath. "Don't bother. They're moving us tomorrow before the bishops arrive. Sending us off to Billings until it's over." Rachel moved quickly to check the other cells. Lucy was in the one next door, pale and weak. Joanna was farther down, the one who had tried to run away last month. She didn't even speak anymore, just wept quietly in the dark. The sight broke me. 3 girls treated like animals, punished simply for not surviving their abuse or daring to want freedom. And I knew, deep down, this was only a sliver of the truth. How many before them had been silenced? How many were gone forever? "We can't just leave them here," I sobbed, my tears falling hot on my cheeks. That's when footsteps echoed down the stairs. Rachel blew out the candle and yanked me behind a stack of wine barrels. My heart pounded so hard I thought the whole convent could hear it. Sister Agnes entered, carrying a lantern, followed by Father Anselm. "The bishops arrive at 8, the priest said. "Make sure these girls are gone by then. And fix their appearance, I don't want any questions." "Yes, Father," Agnes replied. They disappeared into a room at the far end, leaving the door cracked. Rachel and I strained to listen. "And what of the new one, Evelyn?" the priest asked. A chill swept through me at the sound of my name. Rachel squeezed my hand. "She still resists," Sister Agnes answered. "But she's learning. It's Rachel that worries me. She carries rebellion in her eyes. Always questioning." Father Anselm's voice turned cold. "After the bishops leave, I'll deal with both of them. I have my ways." We didn't need him to spell it out. His meaning was clear. Rachel and I exchanged a look in the shadows. There was no more time. If we didn't act soon, we'd be next. When they finally left, we waited in silence until their footsteps faded, then relit the candle. "They're moving you at 5 in the morning, I told Teresa through the bars. Her face lifted weakly. "And you'll come back tomorrow night?" Rachel shook her head. "Not if you escape." "Escape?" Teresa's voice cracked. "We're locked in here. And even if we did get out, where would we go? We have no money, no one to help us." Rachel's eyes gleamed in the flickering light. "I've got a plan, but we'll need help." We slipped back into our rooms before our absence was noticed. I lay on my thin mattress, eyes wide open, mind swirling with images of the basement, the priest's voice, and the broken girls. Sleep never came. The next morning, the bishops arrived exactly at 8. 3 men in purple robes, their faces stern, their presence heavy. The convent lined up in the courtyard, heads bowed, hands folded. Mother Margaret smiled so sweetly, it was as if she were a different person. "Our novices are models of devotion," she said with false warmth. "They live in prayer and labor, following Our Lady's steps." It was all a show. The bishops were paraded through the chapel, the gardens, the dining hall. Not a whisper of the basement, not a sign of the girls locked away before dawn. That evening, worn out from pretending, I found Rachel in the laundry. We were alone, scrubbing sheets in silence. "What about your plan?" I asked, desperate. She leaned close. "Remember Sister Constance, the one in the kitchen? She's not like the others." I've seen her weep in secret. I think she knows this place isn't holy. You think she'd help us? I asked. There's only one way to find out. The next day, after the bishops departed, everything went back to its cruel rhythm. The basement girls returned, locked in their cells under so-called spiritual punishment. A week on bread and water. Rachel, bold as always, approached Sister Constance. And just as she suspected, the older woman carried her own buried grief. She confessed that long ago she'd been sent here after her fiancé died in war. Her family claimed it was God's will she become a nun. Her eyes filled with tears as she whispered, "No one should be forced to stay here. This is not God's work. This is man's cruelty." With her heart laid bare, she agreed to help us. She had access to the kitchen pantry and, more importantly, to the keys of the back gate where supplies were delivered. "In 3 days, the supply truck will come at 4 in the morning," she said. "The driver, Mr. Cecil, is a decent man. He'll take you to Livingston. From there, you can get a bus to Denver." It was the chance we'd been praying for. But I couldn't let it be just for us. "We can't leave the others behind," I insisted. "We have to free the basement girls too." Sister Constance hesitated. "It's dangerous. More people means more risk." Rachel's voice was unwavering. "One for all, or none at all. We leave together, or not at all." So the plan was set. On the night before the delivery, Sister Constance would slip a mild sedative into the nuns' tea, enough to put them into deep sleep. She would use the keys to open the basement doors. At 4 a.m., we'd meet at the back gate where the truck would be waiting. For 2 days, Rachel and I stole scraps where we could: stale bread, fruit from the garden, a few pieces of clothing hidden away. It wasn't much, but it was everything we had. The night finally came. Anxiety kept me awake. Every sound in the convent set my heart racing. The thought of getting caught, of being punished or locked away forever, nearly crushed me. At 3 a.m., I rose silently from my bed. Beneath my habit, I wore the simple skirt and blouse I'd arrived in months before. I clutched the small bundle of bread and fruit, waiting for the signal. Rachel appeared at my door, candlelight dancing across her determined face. It was time. "Everything's ready," Rachel whispered. "Let's go." We slipped through the dark hallway, hearts hammering in our chests. As we passed the Mother Superior's cell, I froze for a second. The sound of her deep snoring reached us through the door. The sedative had worked. At the basement entrance, Sister Constance was waiting. She had already unlocked the cells. Teresa, Lucy, and Joanna stood nearby, pale and shaky, but determined. Their eyes burned with the will to live. "May God protect you," Sister Constance said softly, tracing the sign of the cross over each of our foreheads. "Stay in the shadows, my daughters." She led us quietly through the corridors to the back gate. Every step felt like walking a tightrope. I expected, at any moment, the jangle of keys, the bark of an order, the heavy hand of discovery. But nothing came. Outside, Mr. Cecil was already waiting. His old truck stood under the cover of night, a tarp stretched over the back. Without a word, he motioned for us to climb in. We huddled together as he covered us with straw and burlap sacks. "Stay still," he whispered. "The patrol passes this way sometimes." The gate creaked shut behind us. Then the engine rumbled, carrying us down the dirt road. We were free. After a year and a half in that false holy prison, we were finally free. I lay wedged between Rachel and Teresa under the scratchy straw, and tears slipped down my cheeks. But they weren't from fear or grief. They were tears of relief, of hope, for the first time in forever, the promise of a future. The ride to Livingston lasted 4 long hours. By the time the truck pulled into town, the pale light of dawn was spilling across the sky. Stiff, sore, and exhausted, we climbed down. Yet, inside us, something soared. "This is my niece, Victoria, Mr. Cecil told the woman at the bus station, nodding toward me. "And her friends, they're heading to visit an aunt in Denver." She barely looked up, too busy counting the money he pressed into her hand. Enough for 5 tickets. Money he should have used to feed his own family. I grasped his rough, calloused hands. "God bless you." He gave a tired smile, revealing gaps where teeth had been lost. He already has, child. My sister, she was taken to a convent once. They told us she died of fever. We never saw her again. Not even her body. We know the truth, don't we? On the bus that left at 5 a.m., Rachel, Teresa, Lucy, Joanna, and I sank into the back seats. For the first time in ages, we could talk freely. No eavesdropping. No punishments. Just our voices in the quiet of the early morning. One by one, the girls shared their stories. Teresa's stepfather had sent her away after her mother's death, just to rid himself of the burden she represented. Lucy, only 15, had become pregnant. To hide the scandal, her family forced her into the convent. The child was taken from her at birth and given away. Joanna? She had been caught reading books on women's rights, dangerous ideas for a girl. Different paths, same ending. Young women locked away, silenced, discarded. Where do we even go now? Lucy asked, her voice trembling. She was the youngest, just 17. No one had an answer. None of us had family anymore. None of us had money or a safe place to land. Rachel straightened her back, eyes full of fire. Atlanta, she declared. It's a big city. Opportunities, work. We'll stick together until we find our way. But what if they come after us? Joanna whispered. Then we change our names, Rachel said firmly. Women have always had to disappear to survive. We'll do the same. The bus tore across the countryside, kicking up red dust as the plains gave way to rolling hills. Out the window, I saw rivers sparkling like silver threads under the morning sun. I thought of how everything had shifted since that night at the summer picnic in Promise Creek. My voice broke the silence. When we reach Atlanta, you know what I want to do. Cut my hair. As short as I like. Then grow it back, just because it'll be my choice. The girls laughed. A real laugh. Not forced, not hidden, free and unashamed. I want a plate of meatloaf, Lucy sighed dreamily. With green beans and potatoes. Real food. I just want to sleep in, Teresa murmured. No bells, no prayers. Joanna lifted her chin. I want to learn to read. Then write down everything that happened. So no one can erase us. Rachel squeezed my hand, smiling that brave smile of hers. I want us to never live in fear again. Truth will be our freedom. Her words echoed inside me. I was only 21, but I felt as though my life had already been lived and wasted. Still, I had gained something priceless, courage, friendship, and my own voice. With every mile, we left that convent farther behind. The future in Atlanta was uncertain, but one truth burned bright inside me. I would never be silenced again. My Aunt Clara used to say life is like a river. It might twist and crash against rocks, but it always finds its way to the sea. And so I, Evelyn Peterson, was finally following my own current. Atlanta greeted us with the indifference of a city too large to notice 5 lost girls with small bundles in their arms. The money Cecil had sacrificed was gone, spent on the tickets. We had nothing left, not even breakfast. What now? Teresa murmured, clutching her arms as if to hold herself together. Rachel lifted her chin and pointed across the street to a church. There. Churches usually help. I hesitated. After everything, churches were the last place I wanted to step into. But hunger and exhaustion left no room for pride. St. Martin Delaware Porras stood in a busy square. Mass had just ended. We waited outside until the crowd trickled away, and then the priest appeared. Father Jerome was nothing like the men we had known. He was older, with wild white hair, glasses sliding down his nose, and a kind smile. His cassock looked worn, patched with time. "How can I help you, my daughters?" he asked gently. Rachel spoke for us, spinning a simple story. We were country girls, she said, looking for work with nowhere to stay. No mention of convents, abuse, or escape. Some truths are too heavy to hand to strangers. The priest studied us, and for a moment I thought he'd see straight through us. Then he sighed. "Come. I have little, but I'll share it." He led us to the parish house where a black woman with gray hair was preparing lunch. "Mrs. Miller," the priest said, "we have visitors. 5 plates, please." Her sharp eyes took in our mismatched clothes, our downcast stares, our thin frames. "These girls look like they're running from something," she said bluntly, hands on her hips. My stomach dropped. Rachel stiffened. But then Mrs. Miller smiled wide, showing a gap between her teeth. "Whatever it was, it's behind you now. Here, we don't ask about the past. We build the future. Sit. I'll make coffee." That coffee was the richest thing I'd ever tasted. We devoured fresh bread, cornbread, butter, and steaming mugs of milk coffee. We ate with such desperation Mrs. Miller's eyes softened with pity. Afterward, Father Jerome said, "The parish house is small, but I know someone who can help. A widow named Mrs. Matilda runs a boarding house nearby. She takes in girls from the countryside looking for work. It's safe, clean." So he led us to Mrs. Matilda's place. A big old house with a rose garden out front and chickens in the yard. She was short, stout, and sharp-eyed, with the kind of presence that filled a room. "5 at once, Father Jerome," she chuckled. "What are you trying to do? Turn my house into a convent?" The words stabbed at me. Joanna's face went pale. But the priest quickly assured her, "They're good girls, Mrs. Matilda. Just need a chance." She studied us, then gave a small smile. "I've got 3 rooms. 2 doubles, 1 single. You can take them all." That night, lying in a soft bed for the first time in nearly 2 years, I cried quietly. But this time, the tears weren't of despair. They were of relief. We were safe. We were free. The next morning, reality hit. We had to find work. None of us had skills outside convent chores. No papers. No letters of recommendation. When we returned discouraged, Mrs. Matilda spoke up. "There's a sewing factory nearby. My friend Mrs. Henderson works there. I'll speak to her." At dawn, we walked to the warehouse. Rows of women sat at sewing machines, stitching clothes. The forewoman, Mrs. Clodold, eyed us critically. "Can you sew?" she asked flatly. "Yes," we answered together. And we could. God knows the convent had drilled sewing into us until our fingers bled. "Show me," she ordered, pointing to some idle machines. We each took our seats. The clatter of the machines, the smell of fabric, the rhythm of the work, it all brought the convent back in a rush. But then I glanced around. Here, women were laughing, whispering to one another, even singing softly as they worked. This wasn't prison. This was freedom. Mrs. Clodold inspected our work with a hard eye. Finally, she gave a curt nod. "Not bad." Mrs. Clodold studied us for a long moment, then gave a sharp nod. "I can hire you. You'll be paid by the piece at the end of the week." And so began our new chapter in Atlanta. Our days stretched from 7 in the morning until 5 in the evening at the sewing factory. The work was tiring, but nothing like the convent. Here, the women joked, sang softly, and shared their lives. Many, like us, came from the countryside, carrying stories of hardship and survival. At the end of that first week, we held our wages in our hands. The amount was small, but it was ours earned by our own effort, free of fear or chains. Teresa beamed. "Let's buy new clothes. I can't stand wearing these convent rags underneath anymore." At the market, we picked through second-hand stalls until we each found something that felt like us. For me, it was a light blue dress that flowed when I walked, the exact shade of the Tennessee River. For the first time, I felt like I was choosing who I wanted to be. Bit by bit, we learned the rhythm of the city, how to catch the right buses, haggle at the markets, and ignore the crude remarks from men on the street. On Sundays, we went to Mass at Father Jerome's church. Not from fear of sin, but gratitude. His sermons were unlike any we had heard before. He spoke of a God of love, not punishment. A God who welcomed the broken, not crushed them further. It was there we met Mr. August, retired teacher who held night classes for literacy at the parish. Rachel, bold as ever, asked if we could join. His eyes lit up. Of course. Education is a right, especially for those denied it. So, after long days at the sewing machines, we gave our nights to learning. Letters, numbers, history, geography, the world bloomed open before us. One evening, Rachel lifted her chin and said, "I'm going to get my GED. And after that, college." Lucy laughed. "College? That's too big a dream for us. Rachel shot back, who says? We're just as capable as anyone else. We just never had the chance. Her determination planted something inside me. I thought of my old dream of teaching. Why not reach for it again? A year slipped by since our escape. We saved money, little by little, and built a new life. Lucy fell in love with a kind baker's boy and moved in with his family. Teresa, after finding an aunt willing to help her, returned to her home state. That left Rachel, Joanna, and me. Together we rented a modest little house on the edge of the city. It wasn't much, but it was ours. We even grew herbs and flowers in a small garden out back. Freedom felt sweet. But the past still clawed at us. At night, I sometimes woke shaking, trapped again in dreams of the basement, the punishments, Father Anselm's voice. Rachel, too, had her shadows. Joanna rarely spoke at all, her silence deeper than words. One evening, sipping coffee on our porch, Rachel said what we all felt. We need to face this. Not just whisper among ourselves. The world needs to know. Fear coiled in me. Who would believe us? We're just 3 women with no families, no reputations, no education. We're not just 3 anymore, Rachel answered firmly. We're 5. And there are others, women still trapped, women who got out. She was right. Through night classes, we met Margaret, another survivor. Her story echoed ours. She told us of others, so many others. It wasn't isolated. It was a system. Families sent their daughters to convents to correct them, and priests and nuns abused their power in silence. Around that time, we met Dr. Paul, a lawyer who offered free legal aid at the parish. When he heard our story, he didn't scoff. He didn't doubt. He just listened. It's a complicated case, he admitted. The church is powerful. Without proof, it'll be their word against yours. We have names, Joanna said suddenly, her voice steady for once. We have dates. We have scars. And we're not alone, Rachel added. We can find others. Mr. Cecil. Sister Constance. Survivors. The lawyer stroked his graying beard. It will be a brutal fight. You'll face lies, threats, attempts to ruin you. Are you ready for that? I looked at Rachel, then Joanna. We had been through hell and crawled back out alive. We've been ready our whole lives, I said quietly. We just didn't know it until now. The following months, we worked by day and built our case by night. Dr. Paul helped us gather testimonies from 7 other women who had endured the same horrors. Their stories matched ours like broken mirrors. Margaret introduced us to Robert, a journalist at the Atlanta Journal. He listened carefully. I can't promise my editor will publish it, he warned. The church will fight. But I'll do everything I can. Meanwhile, life went on. I enrolled in the GED program. Rachel prepared for law school. Joanna, with hands finally free, poured her pain into paintings, haunting works of shadows, bars, and reaching hands. One evening, after dinner, I made a decision. I need to go back, I told them. To Promise Creek. Rachel frowned. Are you sure? What about your family? Not to see my family, I explained softly. To see John. He deserves to know. And I need to know what became of him. 2 years of savings bought me a bus ticket. The journey would take days. Before I left, Joanna handed me a painting she had made just for me, a woman standing before a wide blue river under an endless sky. It's you, she whispered. Going back to your river. But walking toward your future. The trip felt like rewinding my life. Each town, each road brought memories, some bitter, some sweet. When the Tennessee River came into view, my heart pounded. Promise Creek hadn't changed, the dirt streets, the small houses, the great stone church still watching from the hill. But I had. I wasn't the naive girl who once danced with John under the stars. I rented a room at a guest house run by a kind woman named Mrs. Appleton. She didn't know me, didn't recognize the name Evelyn Peterson. Why would she? I was just another stranger passing through. The next morning, I went searching. The pharmacy was still there, but the sign was new, New Hope Pharmacy. Dr. John P. Santos, owner. My knees went weak. John had done it. He'd finished school, become a pharmacist, and returned home. I stepped inside, trembling. He was behind the counter, back turned, arranging bottles on a shelf. When he turned around, I almost didn't know him. Taller, stronger, glasses perched on his nose, but the smile. That smile was the same. "Can I help?" he started, then froze. His eyes widened, his mouth fell open. "Evelyn," he whispered, like seeing a ghost. "Evelyn Peterson?" My throat closed with tears. I nodded, unable to speak. "My God, it's really you." He came around the counter, then stopped short, as though afraid to touch me, like I might vanish. "They said you went to a convent. Then they said you died." "I nearly did," I whispered. "But I'm here." He closed the pharmacy for the day. We walked to a small cafe by the river where I told him everything. He held my hands the whole time, sometimes wiping at his eyes. When I finished, he said, "I searched for you. I even went to St. Jude's. They told me there was no one by your name. Your father forbade anyone in town to mention you. Your mother, she got sick from grief." The old ache twisted in me. "My mother," I murmured. "How is she?" His face softened. "She passed last year. Pneumonia, they said. But I know it was from heartbreak." John looked at me with a solemn expression. "Your father hasn't changed. Still in church every Sunday. Still pounding the table, demanding respect." The words cut through me. Once I had been so angry at my mother for her silence, for bowing her head and never fighting back. But now all I felt was sorrow. She had loved me in the only way she knew, quietly, even as her heart broke in silence. I wept for her, for the farewell I never gave, for the strength I had failed to see in her, for the life we could have shared but lost. When my tears slowed, I asked softly, "And you? You've achieved your dream." John smiled, the same smile I had carried in my heart all those years. "I graduated in New Orleans. Came back when my father retired. But I never stopped thinking of you, Evelyn." That afternoon we walked by the river, like two old friends rediscovering each other. He spoke about his studies, his ambitions, the pharmacy he now ran. I told him about Atlanta, about Rachel, Joanna, and our fight for justice. "I want to help," he said firmly. "What was done to you, to the others, it can't be left unanswered." I warned him of the risks, of the power we were challenging. His grip tightened around my hand. "That's all the more reason not to leave you to fight alone." I stayed in Promise Creek for a week. I didn't go to my father's house or seek out my brothers. Some ties, once broken, can't be mended. But I did visit Aunt Clara, who cried when she saw me alive, and a few childhood friends who wrapped me in long embraces. John and I grew closer, cautiously, knowing we weren't the same teenagers from years ago. Still, perhaps something steadier, more enduring, could grow between us. When I returned to Atlanta, I carried two things: John's promise to visit me in 3 months, and my own certainty that the past no longer held me hostage. It was time to face forward. Shortly after, Robert managed to publish our story in the Atlanta Journal. Our names were changed for safety, but there was enough detail that people recognized the convent and its leaders. The piece stirred an uproar. The church issued denials. Letters poured in, some furious at what they called slander, but many more offering support. Most importantly, other women came forward, survivors from different convents, different cities, different decades. The silence of centuries was cracking. Rachel clipped the article and pinned it to our wall. "This is just the beginning," she said. "Now the world knows we aren't alone. And we won't be silent anymore." With Mr. August's help, I found work as a classroom assistant in an elementary school. I wasn't yet the teacher I dreamed of becoming, but I was walking that road. John visited as promised. He met my friends, saw our little home, and understood the life we were building. On his last night before heading back, he told me, "I'm proud of you. After everything, you still find the strength to fight, to build, to help others." I thought of Aunt Clara's words. We never know how strong we are until life tests us. 3 years passed since our escape. Rachel was studying law, juggling classes and work. Joanna had opened a small art studio, teaching underprivileged kids to paint. I had finished my GED, started a teaching program, and John eventually moved to Atlanta. We were building a life together, steady and deliberate. Then one Sunday afternoon, A knock at our door changed everything. A trembling girl, no more than 16, stood on the porch clutching a yellowed newspaper clipping of our article. "Help me," she whispered, her eyes wide with terror. "I escaped from the convent in Billings." She broke down sobbing before she could say more. Rachel, with a mother's instinct, wrapped her in a hug. "You're safe now," she whispered firmly. "You're not alone anymore." As I looked at that girl, I saw myself 3 years earlier, frightened, scarred, but brave enough to run. I handed her a glass of water and asked gently, "What's your name?" She wiped her face and murmured, "Hope." A smile broke across my lips. Life, in its strange humor, had sent us a sign. "Welcome, Hope," I told her. "We have a story to share with you." Hope was only the first. Soon came Connie, just 17, who had fled Billings too. Then Antonia, 22, who had survived 5 years in a Denver convent. Then Clara, Patricia, Agnesa, a steady stream of wounded souls searching for refuge. Our little house couldn't hold them all. With John's help, we rented a larger place on the edge of the city, a simple home with wide rooms and a big yard. We named it Hope House, after the girl who first knocked on our door. Mrs. Miller, retired from working with Father Jerome, joined us in the kitchen. She joked, "This is turning into a boarding house." But Hope House was more than that. It was a sanctuary, a beginning, a place where women could heal and dream again. Rachel, now in her 2nd year of law school, organized weekly support circles. We sat in a big room, chairs arranged in a circle. One by one, women spoke. I walked down the street without lowering my eyes. I spoke to a man without fear. I prayed today because I wanted to, not because I was forced. Small victories celebrated with applause, hugs, and tears. Our case against St. Jude's crawled through the courts. Dr. Paul, still leading our legal fight, now had a team of former students working pro bono. The church denied everything, shuffled priests and nuns to distant cities, and even lost documents in mysterious fires. Witnesses vanished. Still, we pressed on. "It's David against Goliath," Dr. Paul sighed once. Rachel, ever defiant, answered, "And this time, David isn't alone." Robert moved on to a national newspaper, amplifying our voice. Letters of support came from everywhere. Donations arrived, small and large. But so did threats, anonymous calls, death notes, cold stares in the street. Whenever fear crept in, John reminded me, "I am your safe harbor." Hope House became more than shelter. We built a school inside. Joanna taught art, Rachel explained rights, I taught English and math, John gave lessons in health. Volunteers came to teach sewing, cooking, even computers. It was Father Jerome who advised us to formalize. "Make it official. Register it as a non-profit. It'll give you protection." So we did. We named it the Mary Liberator Association, chosen by the women themselves, not after me, but after the Mary who represented God's mercy and motherhood, not his judgment. By then, I was teaching in a public school, finally living my dream. John and I married in the garden of Hope House, under the open sky. Mr. August officiated, asking, "Do you promise to build your life on respect, kindness, and freedom?" "We promise," we answered, hand in hand, surrounded by our chosen family. But joy is never untouched. Just a week later, we got word. The lawsuit against the convent was dismissed for lack of evidence. Years of work, testimonies, records, thrown aside. Rachel wept. How can they ignore so many voices? Dr. Paul shook his head. The powerful protect the powerful. That night, Hope House gathered. "This isn't the end," I told them. "One battle lost doesn't mean the war is over." Antonia, bitter, asked, "But what chance do we have?" "They have everything: money, power, influence. We have nothing." I looked at her, at all of them, survivors with scars inside and out. "We have the truth. And we have each other. That's more than they'll ever have." We shifted our fight. If courts wouldn't hear us, the world would. We planned a book, a documentary, talks at schools and universities. Robert helped us connect with a small independent publisher. We called the book Voices of Silence. Each chapter told a woman's story, her suffering, yes, but also her journey to reclaim life. It took 14 years to complete. Reliving those memories was painful, but writing them was healing too, like opening an old wound to let it breathe. The book never became a bestseller, but it found its way into classrooms, seminars, feminist circles, and human rights groups. Most importantly, it found its way into the hands of other women who had lived through the same horrors. Letters began arriving at Hope House from all over the country. Some were short. I went through that too. Thank you for reminding me I'm not alone. Others were long, spilling out decades of silence, confessions locked away for 20, 30, 40 years. And then one letter came, the one that would change everything. The letter came from a woman in New Orleans, Louisiana. Her name was Martha, and she had once been a novice at the Sisters of Divine Providence back in the 1960s. She carried something we had never had before, real, solid evidence. When she escaped in 1968, she took with her the diary of the Mother Superior. Inside were chilling details, punishments for rebellious girls, nights of forced isolation, even records of priests visiting novices in the dark with dates, names, and twisted evaluations. Martha had hidden that diary for nearly 20 years, too afraid to trust the police or the church. But after reading our book, she finally knew who she could trust. Rachel went to New Orleans herself to bring it back. A week later, she returned with weary eyes, but a blazing determination. She held up the small black notebook. "It's all true," she said. "And it's worse than we imagined." It wasn't just a few corrupt priests and nuns. It was an organized system, documented, deliberate, and covered up. With that diary in hand, Dr. Paul filed a new lawsuit, this time not against a single convent, but against the entire archdiocese. Bigger, riskier, harder to ignore. The story broke wide. Robert ran it on the front page, printing fragments from the diary. National papers picked it up. Television stations came knocking. Rachel shook her head. They're terrified. Afraid others like Martha will appear, with more diaries, more proof. The threats against us grew harsher. Rocks shattered our windows. John's car was keyed. The phone rang at night with voices that whispered they knew where our families lived. John pleaded with me to step back, at least until after the baby was born. By then, I was carrying our first child, and his concern was real. But as I held my hand over my growing belly, feeling the gentle kicks, I knew this child deserved a world where truth was stronger than silence. "We're not quitting," I told him. "We'll be careful, but we won't stop." That fall, Joanna transformed her art studio into an exhibition. She called it Walls of Silence. Each canvas, each sculpture carried the weight of our stories. The centerpiece was a mural. Every painted brick bore the name of a woman who had suffered inside those convents. More than 300 names. Each one, Joanna explained through tears, is a piece of the wall we're tearing down. The exhibition drew national attention. Reporters came from every corner. Human rights groups offered help. Even politicians began speaking out. And under the weight of that spotlight, the church finally broke its silence. They formed a commission to investigate. Rachel scoffed. A wolf doesn't investigate the disappearance of sheep. And she was right. The commission's report dismissed the horrors as isolated mistakes. But public opinion had shifted. The courts still dragged, but we weren't standing alone anymore. In July of 1987, I gave birth to a healthy baby boy. His cry filled the room like thunder. John whispered, tears in his eyes. He already knows how to be heard. We named him Peter, our rock. Motherhood sharpened my resolve. It wasn't just about the past anymore. It was about the world my son would inherit. Hope House was overflowing, sheltering 16 women full-time and helping dozens more. Rachel, now a lawyer, had opened her own practice. Change was slow, but it was real. Then came the news. Father Anselm, the confessor who had haunted us, was dead. A note by his body read, "I can no longer bear the weight of what I've done." His suicide stirred no joy in me, only a heavy kind of closure. Joanna whispered as she held the newspaper, not the confession we wanted, but still, a confession. And then the silence cracked wide open. Former novices. Former nuns. Even Sister Constance herself, old now but unshaken, stepped into the light. On national television, she said, what happened in those convents was not God's work. It was cruelty hiding behind his name. Her words carried power. And when a new bishop took over the archdiocese later that year, he ordered St. Jude's shut down forever. This place no longer serves its mission, he declared. The convent became a shelter for victims, renamed in honor of Sister Constance. The courts moved at last. The archdiocese proposed a settlement, compensation for the women, a fund for victims, and reforms. But we demanded one more condition, that Voices of Silence be printed and placed in libraries and schools across the country. To our surprise, Bishop Matteo agreed. These stories must be known, he said, so they are never repeated. By the end of 1987, the agreement was signed. It wasn't perfect, but it was a beginning. With the money, John and I bought a modest home with a garden for Peter. Rachel expanded her law practice. Joanna grew her studio. And Hope House became a model for shelters across the nation. Years passed. Peter grew into a bright, sensitive boy who defended kids at school and asked questions that pierced straight to the truth. When he was 5, I stood before a packed auditorium at Georgia State University and told my story for the first time in public. My voice trembled, but as I looked out at John, Peter, Rachel, and Joanna in the crowd, I found strength. By the end, the room was on its feet, clapping through tears. That day, I understood. My story wasn't just mine anymore. It belonged to every woman who had lived in silence, and to everyone still searching for their voice. Years rolled on. Rachel became one of the most respected lawyers for women's rights in the country. Joanna pioneered art therapy. Hope House grew into a national network. And I kept teaching, raising Peter, loving John, and telling our story. When John died of cancer, half my heart went with him. But the other half beat on, steady and strong, because the fight wasn't over. At 72, I returned to St. Jude's. The gates were open, the gardens alive with laughter. The cells were now rooms of safety. The basement where I once wept had become an art gallery. And on the front wall hung a plaque with all our names, mine, Rachel's, Joanna's, Teresa's, Lucy's, and Sister Constance's. Standing there, I felt peace, not the kind that forgets, but the kind that knows the struggle mattered. Now, as I sit beneath the stars in Atlanta, I think of the girl I once was, the child of Promise Creek, the trembling novice, the fugitive in a straw-filled truck, the teacher who rebuilt her life. All those versions of me live inside, their scars shining like medals. And so, if you are listening to my story now, hear this. Silence only protects the abuser. A voice, no matter how small, has the power to heal, to connect, to change everything. You are not alone. Your story matters. Speak it. Share it. Let the truth burn through the dark. I am Evelyn M. Peterson. And this is my testimony of pain, of survival, of faith that frees instead of chains.